Shall we begin, or we have 1 other minute?
Let's give everyone just 1 minute to come in.
Are those little chimes, people coming in?
Those are our old clock. We bought one with our marriage money 44 years ago.
Well, now that we've ascertained that everybody on here is a house full of antiques behind them.
Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Great. So welcome to the second of our 3-part webinar series on engaging the new college learner. We're especially delighted today to have group representation from several of our finest liberal arts colleges, colleges that truly change lives. We've begun to have some really interesting formal conversations, dialogue with these colleges, and we invite you to contact us if you'd like to talk about your college. Last time we met, we focused on the immediate enrollment crisis. We looked at ways of assuring that incoming students would be comfortable and feel that they'd made the right choice in coming to you. We're fully aware that this crisis is far from being resolved at this time, and that makes us especially grateful that you responded to our invitation today to look into the future. Today, we look at the challenge of building admission streams from area high schools, and also to gathering a team on your campus to revitalize.
Oops.
Whoops.
Looks like Rob had a technical error.
Yeah.
So you want to grab this, Eli?
Yeah, I will grab this while Rob figures that out. So today, we look beyond the immediate crisis to building growing admission
A webinar without
from area high schools, and to gathering a team on campus to revitalize the first 2 years of college for the benefit of all students. So
okay, looks like Rob is back.
It wouldn't be a webinar if my laptop hadn't fallen back off the bench. So,
and Rob, we're on slide 4 now.
We are on slide 4. Okay, and can you get? Yes. So I'm Rob Freed, the executive director, and with me again are our chief strategist, Mary Lynn, and
hey there.
Our director of research,
Hey.
Kramer. And our 2 guests today are Ken Cadow and Gregory Prince, and they're neighbors in Vermont, and they are both very much engaged in helping to reform secondary education so that more students get what they need from that. We want today's webinar to be as interactive as the technology allows. So please do press the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and give us your questions and comments. Mary will be gathering those, and we will have 2 opportunities for that. The first will be at the end of our first part on regional partnerships, and the second chance for dialogue will be when we have finished talking a little bit about how your college can better serve students in their freshman, sophomore college years.
And we're going to try and be more interactive and have more of a conversation. So if we're answering your question and we don't quite get to all of it, put your follow-on question in the question area too.
Q&A. Great. So we have a special guest, another special guest today, which is our bear, our friendly bear, NAB, who reminds us that the future of liberal education will belong to those who are bold in imagining a vibrant future for liberal arts colleges as being indispensable to our creating a more humane society, to being effective in marketing that vision, that future to audiences on and off our campus, to affirming those who care so much about your college and of the work you've already done to enhance your future, and by being realistically and allocating your scarce resources for maximum impact. But speaking of being bold, one of our college partners, Kirk Robinson, reminds us that we've been here before, that we have tried half measures for undergraduate college reform, and we've learned that half measures don't work. We've seen it happen all too often. A great idea that gets funded and then disappears when the money runs out. A dynamic vision that originates in one department but gets ignored by others. Or a faculty member who's able to get tremendous results in teaching introductory courses, but somehow fails to get tenure. Our ideas are not particularly new. All of them are being tried to one extent or another on your and other campuses. But what's different about the New American Baccalaureate is that we work really hard to make these ideas mutually reinforcing. And we think that this can make a huge difference in avoiding the failures that result from these half measures. So I hope we get to hear from you in our discussion about this. You all already visit area high schools during their college fair days. We suggest that you select 3 to 5 area high schools and find people there who care not only about the honor students and the special needs students, but also about students who are smart in unconventional ways, whose learning may have been stifled by current pedagogy, and students for whom too many have expectations that are too low, or who come from families that are not particularly college oriented. And working with those colleagues at these high schools to help these students see your school, your college, as their key to a great future. Matt Groening characterized the low expectations for these students in a cartoon that he penned 35 years ago. Many high schools, of course, have come a long way from this, but perhaps not far enough. And we suggest that here lies a great opportunity for liberal arts colleges. Our friend Kathy Davidson, who's written this wonderful book, The New Education, talks about the need to find and engage what she calls scrappy genius. And Mike Rose, who is also a member of our board, has spent his career as a champion of students from lower income, immigrant and working class backgrounds. And Mike Rose is convinced that many of these young people would make great college students. But the barriers are real, and too few high schools and colleges offer these kids the kind of support that would break down these barriers. Well, what are the barriers? We suggest that to many families in your region, in your geographical region, a liberal arts college may look too expensive. It may seem too exclusive, and it doesn't clearly lead to well-paying careers. These are among the reasons we find that relatively few working class kids from high schools in your region can imagine themselves coming to a liberal arts college like yours. Are they really there? These students, are they really out there? And if they are, how can our high schools and colleges count on each other to support them and make this partnership work? And now I'd like to call on our guests, Ken Cadow from Randolph Union High School and Gregory Prince, former president of Hampshire College, to respond to these questions. Ken, would you like to go first?
Certainly. Those kids are definitely out there. and I have a bunch of examples that I could share, but I think a single concrete one would serve best. I had a student 4 years ago who was legendary in his own family for having learned how to use a circular saw when he was 8. And by the time he came into my sort of sphere of influence in 7th grade, he was building stools. By the time he was a sophomore, he was very much self-identified as a hands-on learner, had pieced together his own sawmill, owned his own tractor from that he'd purchased with furniture that he'd bought. And it took us a great amount of effort just to keep him in school and convince him that even undergrad or even secondary education was appropriate for him. By his junior year, we developed a comprehensive independence study for this student. Math was his business plan, and some geometry in there in terms of woodworking was, of course, part of it. Science was learning about forestry management. English was journaling and reading periodicals that he was interested in. Social studies was a study of the reasons behind permitting, licensing, and all of that stuff. A lot of detail went into this, and I'm being really brief. But it also involved interaction with the forestry club at Dartmouth, and an internship with our town's director of economic development, and who was a big liberal arts guy. So a lot of exposure to the heady ideas. And right before he graduated, this student came to me and he said, Mr. Cadow, I'm interested in, I'd like to take a couple of classes at the, couple community college classes. And so he's done that now for 2 years in a row. And this year applied to a 4-year school. And so he'll be a freshman in a 4-year liberal arts school starting next year, a couple years older than most of his peers. But it was, I like to call it the ivory outhouse, the sense of heady thoughts while still having your fingers, in the dirt and the ground. How do we get these students to appreciate both the heady thoughts while still knowing that the 4 years that they're in school, they will be able to continue. They're not setting aside something. 4 years is a big investment, as well as money, just time in the hands-on learner's life.
What about you, Gregory?
Absolutely, the students exist. There is a huge potential there. I could match what Ken just said. A student I worked with, other people worked with, homeless through his entire 4 years in high school, was gay. I will not say which college he ended up at, but he was gay. One of his parents tried to set him on fire to purify him. He basically couch surfed through high school, was illegal, did not have immigrant status, but he knew people who supported him, a number of people who worked with him, believed in him. He visited some colleges, found one of the top liberal arts colleges in America that he really wanted to go to. They talked with him and said, this is what you'd have to do to come. He went off and did most of it. He changed one of the terms of the contract. The college said, you changed the terms, you can't come. Go back and do what the terms said, and you can come. And he did, and he graduated. Is now back teaching in his equally challenging high school, where he was just fired from his job because he was actually doing it too aggressively. That we hope will be remedied.
Right.
Incredible resilience, perseverance, and quality exist. And there is no doubt there's plenty out there to go around for everybody.
One of the things we're going to be looking at is, along with these exceptional stories, and we all of us know some exceptional students, would be those students who really need more support from their peer group and as we move ahead. And we're actually going to be talking about that. But I want to ask Eli whether what the research suggests about these so-called academically underperforming but students with hidden potential. What have you found, Eli?
Sure, and thanks, Rob. Just to piggyback on what Greg and Ken said, these students absolutely exist. And just to add something, I think we all know they exist. In fact, you all know they exist. The last several decades of higher education has seen a rapid transformation of who's a quote unquote a traditional student. A rapid increase in first generation students, with adult learners, with those who do meet the traditional kind of SAT profile from the working class, from rural backgrounds. So the question then is, as you know, not so much are they there, as I would put it, but how do we recruit and retain them? And especially, how do residential liberal arts colleges compete with community colleges and research universities, and especially public ones, as a competitive and meaningful option for these students?
Right, right.
A part of the solution, I think, is also one that's simple, but takes a lot of work to do really well, which is it's not just getting the students in the door, right? It's building a program that co-creates with them, actually ask them what they need and what would actually help them succeed, and then builds a program for them. And we have a lot to learn from different programs that, of course, have their own strengths and weaknesses. But two here that I think are really illustrative and are already well known are, for example, the Posse Foundation. And what we can learn from the Posse Foundation is that cohorts for first generation, lower income students that really build the ground pace of support and ongoing dialogue and mentorship is essential to retaining different kinds of non-traditional students who are now the traditional students of higher education. And since 2018, Posse has been able to say that they are able to graduate 90% of students. Another example we can learn from is College Unbound, whose work for adult students has been remarkable, and especially in a radically transformed curriculum that includes both independent study work and projects as a part of the essential curriculum, not something done at the periphery. And this has led to some really astounding success, with a retention rate at 85%, graduation rate at 83%, students who advance to a better position after the school were 83%, 87% have jobs right now. And most importantly, 80% describe the experience as significantly transformative. Now we all recognize that these can't happen exactly the way they happen at these special programs, but what I think they show is gearing towards the context of the students you're working with is really what's essential to this. And just quickly at the NAB, we really want to work with you on local research designs to understand what's happening with working class, rural students, what they need, who they are, what kind of programming would really work for them. We also want to talk to entrepreneurs in your both cultural and business in your local area to understand the skills and projects they're working on and how they can engage as part of a community network, and also with your faculty as relational dialogue and organizing partners, not as someone we talk at or tell what to do, but as our chief resources for building something sustainable for your college.
So here's one way we think we can overcome some of those barriers and reach these kids and inspire them to gear up for your college. We call it the Curiosity Course, and Mary Lynn has been working on this idea for many weeks now. Talk to us a little bit about this.
Or perhaps my whole life I've been working on this. Thanks, Rob. The idea of the Curiosity Course is to take the best, the most engaging and the most inspiring questions and activities that those of us who have been working in higher ed and have experienced higher ed, especially self-directed and experiential learning in a context of the liberal arts, to take these ideas and sort of micro encapsulate them to make them to bring them to high schools as an exciting taste for these students, these scrappy geniuses who may not be at all interested in college. But if they can be introduced to the great questions and really interesting ways to learn in a cohort or a Posse style learning environment, and with interesting people, perhaps recent graduates who have degrees in education or who are in the community, as entrepreneurs, and who inspire the students to think, I want to be able to think like this, do these things, and be like this person.
So what are some of the questions that you call the essential questions?
Well, I think that's in the next slide. So these are the essential questions that that really come from, they go all the way back to Plato and Socrates. When one can engage intelligently and with some sophistication in discourse about these questions, that leads you into that can open a door to the fact that these have been the great questions throughout time. Questions like, what do I really care about? What do I love? What do I love to do? What problems in the world would I like to solve? What kinds of things would I like to try with no risk? What kind of person do I want to be? And what kind of people do I want to surround myself with?
So give us an idea of like what you would do with these questions, where you would go with them, what would be some of the activities that you...
Well, I love Ken's example. I love Ken's example of eliciting from students what it is that they're already passionate about. And it sounds like in Ken's case, that student who, gosh, was running saws and equipment and had his own sawmill when he was, a preteen. Students like that could be encouraged to put together a portfolio that assembles all of their interest in their study, their autodidaction and their experiential learning that they've done in a topic, and then to be have it introduced to them ways in which to expand their research on that topic, to find ways to share it with other people. And just the act of creating a portfolio where you can see your learning helps with self-efficacy.
Then of course, from some of these pop-up sessions that might take place, in study halls or in lunchrooms, very informal and very easy to work on, we could then help these students design a course that could be taught in the high school. Right. But what's special about this curiosity idea and makes it really different from what many of these students have experienced in their non-honors courses is that so much comes from them. So much is drawn from their ideas, right, and their concerns, rather than delivered to them as important instruction. It's easy. They're not being tested. They're not being graded. They're not. There's no right answer to any of these questions.
Right, and if you can go back one slide, there's an idea in here that I think is another, the idea of collaboratively designing the ideal high school course, or doing a collaborative project. Like, for example, if there's a project outline, this is how you build a project. You decide what your outcomes want to be, what your product wants to be like, who wants to be involved. That sort of helps students to collaboratively engage in project planning and business planning, and then have that tied to well, then what are the things that you need to learn, that you need to understand in order to be able to do something like this, to help to begin the process of planning a life and seeing how being involved in the liberal arts is part of planning a life.
I think that's really, again, builds on what Ken and Gregory have talked about, that we're not trying to tell students that all the rest of your education doesn't work. In fact, this is a link back to some of their courses to help them understand maybe how to get more out of high school than they are getting at now. But it also gives them a sense of how college is different from what they've experienced.
Right.
And we see the possibilities of bringing these students in groups onto campus for a weekend or a day, meeting other students from regional high schools, kids they play basketball with or other sports, and realizing that, wow, this college has a relationship with our communities that's more than it has before. Ken, you've
Right.
talked a little bit about that, about the need for high schools and colleges to serve one another, to serve the community.
Before we do that, Rob, I just want to jump in really quick and let our attendees know that now is the time to start writing your questions and putting them into the queue because we have a question and answer period coming up soon. And I see there's no questions in there yet. So maybe folks don't know that down at the bottom, there's a little Q&A button. So you can click that and type your questions.
Great.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that, Rob. Most of our secondary schools have faculty at the school that graduated from the nearby universities and colleges, and that's the easiest sort of quick link that we need to make. So we've been able to, particularly in a course that we have called water management, which is science-based. Kids get science credit for it. They also get history credit for it because we're talking about public policy and water rights and all kinds of things. We have had faculty from, we're in Vermont, so from Dartmouth and Middlebury and Norwich University and Vermont Technical College all come to our school to speak to the students and run workshops with the students. And also our students have gone up and sat in on classes being offered in civil engineering. And it's a really, and we have faculty from Norwich, from Dartmouth, and from Middlebury on our secondary school staff.
So let's see. Do we have any questions yet, or should we just move on to the second part and about that is perhaps more focused on what happens on campus?
There are no questions yet.
Okay, well, let's go. Enrolling more students from regional high schools is just the beginning. We have to make sure that what they find on your campus really works for them, and indeed for all of today's new college learners. I'm pretty sure you've done this before. Most colleges are continuously upgrading and reworking their curriculum, especially for the introductory courses. But again, does it go beyond the half measures that Kirk Robinson warned us about? Do we start by emphasizing learning from the student's point of view? What will get them really excited about college level learning? Unfortunately, too many of the initiatives I'm aware of get bogged down in departmental politics. So one of the toughest questions to ask is, are our students acquiring the kinds of skills that will serve them well, along with the broader perspectives that they will gain from a liberal education? A combination that, after all, is what our best employers are asking for. Does the curriculum that we offer freshmen and sophomore help them bridge the gap between learning to think deeply and apply knowledge to the complex challenges of today's society? Students shouldn't have to wait until they're seniors to begin to apply their knowledge. I mean, just think of how medical education has been revolutionized by bringing first-year medical students into hospitals to work with patients before they even memorize the body parts. My good friend, Dennis Litke, has been wrestling with the need for such reform for decades. And here's part of what he told me quite recently. So he goes on to say that this argument that there's somehow a division, a chasm between liberal arts and workplace skills is no longer valid in the 21st century, that we need both. So, but let's be clear about what we're not advocating. We are not advocating talking about grafting a liberal arts veneer onto vocational programs. You know, we've heard from the so-called champions of liberal education. I've heard them on NPR beg our universities to require at least one humanities course in their technical and vocational programs. And I think that's an insult to liberal education. Our challenge is to deepen the intellectual engagement of our students, not dilute it by embellishing narrow vocational programs with humanities course or two. We think that the bringing together of practical skills and applying skills and the great questions of liberal arts is the answer. And here's how we propose to make this work. We want to bring the curiosity course energy and ethos into the freshman, sophomore seminars to engage all of our students. The easy part is to set up the courses. We talk about courses like math, science, magical mystery seminar, which is something I wish I had when I went to college, because I couldn't understand why we needed to learn math, and science was also pretty obscure to me. But I really wish I'd had a seminar like this that brought this together. And then there's the whole idea of entrepreneurship, which, you know, in the last century, you would never have found an entrepreneurship seminar in traditional liberal arts colleges, but especially in the freshman, sophomore year. But that's all changed. Creativity and creating your own job is something that liberal arts students are going to have to be able to do. And then again, there's the whole question of democracy. Democracy is under threat the way it has never been before. And our democratic values are being challenged and undermined by some of the very same young people who, or their parents, who were not admitted, not part of a liberal education in our past century. This great divide between liberally educated people and those who don't have a college education is what brought us Donald Trump, and will bring us Donald Trump again unless we figure out ways to bridge that gap and involve a greater spectrum of young people in the liberal arts. So
Rob, the questions are stacking up. I just want to check in with you when we can go to them, and some of them are quite relevant to stuff that you're saying right now.
Great, let's go in.
Okay, let's get into some questions. The first one is from James Wildman. Love that name. Mm-hmm. He asks, back to barriers, how to bring the parents along. They likely don't value college and will be skeptical about cost, exclusiveness, and the liberal arts focus on thinking and writing rather than job-specific jobs training. And Gregory Prince would like to answer that one live.
Thank you. I mean, the first thing you can say to parents is that at the end of the day, the jobs that they now are thinking about their children having won't exist in 10 or 15 years, and that the responsibility of all of us is, in effect, as I always said to students, to parents of my students at Hampshire, our responsibility is to help your child create a job, not get a job. Because 15 years from now, the job they're going to have doesn't exist, and I can't tell them what to do to prepare for it. They're going to have to create it and figure that out. And a lot of parents understood that. They've seen enough of change, and they're willing to, I think, willing to accept that if they see that they're going to get an education that really does help them figure out the entrepreneurial spirit that allows them to create a job, the creative, I think, the things that we were talking about earlier with respect to the kinds of things they need to be exposed to in college.
And the marketplace bears that out, Gregory. Every few months, there's another article in Wired or another one of the, TechCrunch about how the big tech companies are recruiting for liberal arts majors again, because engineers don't have the skills to become a manager, and they have, their set of skills is narrow, whereas graduates in the liberal arts have the ability to analyze critically across problems using a lot of different skill sets, and they have the interpersonal skills that come from defending your ideas in a small classroom.
Right, right. And the answer to Jim's question about parents is to engage the business community while we're engaging the high school, so that we create forums in a high school where college folk, business folk, and high school folk invite parents of all students to look at exactly what Gregory has talked about, creating the ability to survive the next big recession. What do we need to build into our program? And I think the answer for parents' skepticism will be when they hear from the people who actually do the hiring, what kind of skills they want.
Right. So, Jim, I hope we answered your question. I'm going to mark this answered, but if you have a follow-on, please do to put that in the question and answer it as well. Great. And should we go to the next question?
Sure.
Okay. Ali Chafing asks, I'm especially interested in how to better support local teenagers who are refugees. We have strong relationships with the Refugee Support Organization and the local international high school, and have worked with several recently arrived teens who are incredibly young adults, but their English language skills are far from college ready, familial and cultural barriers. So we're working on this with a mentor program, but even just tackling the FAFSA forms discouraged several students from moving forward. So would somebody like to grab that?
I would, I'll start again if I could, only that what I've found in dealing with students who are new to this country in high schools is to, first of all, get them to understand that they are as smart as anyone else in the room. Just because they have a language problem doesn't mean they aren't smart. A lot of people around them will treat them as if they are not smart because they have a language problem. So first you have to maintain their understanding that having a language problem is not a measure of their capacity. From that, you then have to build strategies where they begin to gain confidence in using that language. And that's where the mentoring that the person suggested, those programs are absolutely essential. Also internships with individuals who will be supportive of their language learning.
One of the things that a college mentor or a curiosity course can do is create a sense of internationalism within the high school. I can't tell you how many high schools now in New Hampshire have 30 languages spoken, and sometimes those are seen as obstacles, whereas in fact they are a tremendous, tremendous resource, intellectual and social resource for all the students. And sometimes it takes that college person in that environment to help create cultural events and help these immigrant students and other non-traditional students feel that they're part of what America is all about.
Just to add one additional thought along that line, speaking to what I discussed earlier, we definitely follow the line in the NAB that it's not always a question of is the student college ready, but is the college student ready,
right.
Which is obviously simple and important, but takes a lot of work. And I think one of the additional parts of that everyone's stressing, and I would want to stress even more, is that the cohort support is really integral for refugee and really any international student to really surviving and thriving in a liberal arts environment. I can't tell you how many times, both the research and actually from personal experience, I've heard stories of international students or refugee students just kind of floating around campus. Well, we already know from places like Posse but you all know from your first year seminars, right? Is that a grounded sense and identity in a larger community that at least, even if they don't share the same experiences, really recognizes them and feels like those stories are heard, is really invaluable for the retention process. Even with the skills just as much, it's probably in some ways more critical.
I agree, Eli, and just building on that and what Gregory has said here is that when you are building an experiential portfolio and you are learning how to learn based in your area of interest, then that can be used to build language skills as well.
Right.
Topical and self-directed learning is, now there's a bunch of research, I'm sure Eli can speak to this, showing that those are actually very effective ways to build language skills. Let me go to
what we're talking about in redoing the first 2 years of college education, the freshman sophomore experience, depends and brings together all of the things that you have said. We need to create something that's coordinated, something that is collaborative, a situation where students move from one seminar to another, where teachers are talking with each other, where they're planning curriculum together, so that they get a sense of community, not only socially, but within the academic program. How do we create a sense of community, a sense of mutuality, a sense of interdependence? One of the ways of doing that, which we will talk about perhaps more in 2 weeks, is to create expectations, performance expectations that include helping other students learn, so that students who are working with each other, with faculty who are collaborating in interdisciplinary ways, with learning how to help other people learn, it helps them also on the road to those successful careers where being able to coach and support other workers is absolutely crucial. I almost lost my computer.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Should we continue on with these, or should we go to the next section?
No, let's continue. These questions are really valuable. We're almost at the end. All we're going to talk about is that, and we can cover that briefly.
Let's just go on.
Sure.
Okay, David Steelman says, success promoting involvement in the proposed program. I'm not sure if that's the Curiosity course or the NAB Foundation program, but probably for both, might involve the use of a business case to convince college students, parents, college trustees, high school funding authorities, and finance directors of businesses that joining the proposed partnership will yield a return on investment. What are key features of such a business case, and have you made progress towards creating one for each kind of potential partner? Well, I mean, actually, I've been working with us on building specifically business cases and using that language. So yes, David, I would say that we are building those business cases. Eli has put together an insane amount of literature review, and we also are mounting and running original research and working with colleges to get some of these programs set up so that we will not only have case studies as part of the business case, but evidence from the field and from the partners through our research as to what it is that they're looking for and how that might be delivered by the colleges. I hope that's enough of an answer. Does anyone have anything else to add?
I think let's move, because one of the points we really haven't gotten to is that what we're talking about is not just for the unusual learner or the non-traditional learner, but for all students. And so the seminars that we've just talked about, they're all over the place. They're already being offered, but the question is, are they being coordinated? Are they helping to build that community? Do they emphasize collaborative teaching and learning? And are the essential skills sort of part of that? Our friends, Gregory Prince and Tony Wagner and Dick Hirsch and other leading voices keep reminding us that these reforms are not just for first-gen, working class, immigrant, or other new learners. They are what every student needs. And the benefits to your college may well extend far beyond these local communities, even though what you're doing is creating a sense of collaborative learning that has not traditionally been part of undergraduate education, particularly in the early years. Liberal education is in decline in this country. Majors in humanities have dropped precipitously in the last half century, but it need not be so. I think the benefits of liberal education are more important now than they ever have been. But this work needs to be coordinated. It needs to cross disciplines, to cross departments. It needs to be infused with essential skills and assessed authentically rather than through tests. We think these goals are doable and they are realistic. And we are looking forward in our next webinar to really getting at the nitty-gritty of how we make this happen. There are tough questions that we need to look at, but we can count on our bear again to help us. That we are about inventing our future as essential colleges. We're about ongoing enrollment streams that we can count on growing from year to year as siblings get to see their older brothers and sisters succeeding in a liberal arts college that was never part of their upbringing or their dreams. We can build on the best of the important work that you are doing already in your colleges, and we can find a way to start small with experimental programs, with looking at indicators of success, but aiming big, aiming for something that can bring liberal arts and liberal education back to the forefront in America of how we build a future and how we build a society that respects democratic and humane values. So some of the questions we're going to be looking at next time are the nitty-gritty, and some of you have already brought them up and you may be writing them down furiously now. We're going to look at how to help get this started, how to know if this is working, how to know if the curiosity course that we've just brought into the high school is beginning to change students' minds and perhaps the minds of some of their teachers. How we make this affordable. We have done some real in-depth study about how to make this affordable. And looking at the benefits to faculty while emphasizing that for faculty, this has to be a voluntary engagement. We can't be changing faculty contracts in order to make this happen. We have to create an environment where people want to teach in this way. Who else besides current faculty will teach curiosity in seminars? A lot of great suggestions have come from you already about involving retiring faculty who want to stay in teaching, students who've just graduated who want to spend a year perhaps working with freshmen and sophomores before they go on to grad school. All these ideas are ones that we're going to get to in depth in our next workshop, and our next webinar, in 2 weeks. Do we have any more questions that have come up?
We do. And again, pertinent to things we've been talking about, Jerry King asks, Rob mentioned engaging the business community. I think what's missing from our great coalition of invested professionals who are promoting this is the workplace community. We can't just ask them to weigh in, we have to ask them to be part of the movement in advisory groups and on the board. They will be quoted in the media because their communities rely on them. So would somebody like to respond to that idea of involving the business community, not just by asking feedback, but having them be part of the college community?
I could speak to that. We have
A lot of
another.
experience with that, Ken.
We have another course which we teach called an Introduction to Manufacturing and Entrepreneurship, with an essential question for high school students of how do we get from an idea to a profitable, reliable solution. And we partner with 3 different manufacturers for that. And what we realized initially was I take the students actually to a couple of area manufacturers, and also to a technical college, and also we are visited by a person whose expertise is in workforce development. The benefit to the area businesses was actually that they realized a great deal of what we know about pedagogy, about teaching and learning, was something that they were able to benefit in their own internship programs. So actually one of Vermont's largest Vermont-based employers is a valuable partner in this. And so I showed them a bunch of, I helped to prepare what we call the field experts, the people on the floor who are experts in their particular role in getting some idea to production. I talked to them a lot about how to teach, how to be comfortable with uncomfortable silence, and we've now had, I think we're on our 10th. It's a semester-long course, and we just wrapped up our 10th course this year.
Ken, do any of the students outside of vocational-oriented programs take this course?
Absolutely, it is open to everyone. In fact, our school does not send a lot of students to Ivy Leagues, but we did have a student a couple years ago who went to Cornell, who told me that was his most valuable high school course.
That is itself
That's
a huge change.
Example.
A huge change, a sea change in how we look at the interface between essential skills and essential ideas. And I think everything we're talking about is about a marriage that has all too often not happened on our campuses, between great ideas and great projects and great collaborations.
Just as another very quick example here, one of our board of advisors is Nathan Schmidt, who runs the How to New Collective out of Denver. And he has this program called Hack School, which is part of their Greater School Collective. One of their projects, and it's a model we hope to build upon in the NAB, and in fact are planning and thinking about, is they worked with a local school for the blind in India on what kind of learning devices might be helpful for the students, from everything from reading, writing, and they actually worked with other students on this. And they came up with another number of projects. And part of Hack School's design is they use 3D printers and other technology to actually genuinely solve the problem, not just talk about it, but also in some ways build it too. Wow. So they ended up creating a number of different objects that were tremendously successful. And they're looking at scaling up and working with local businesses within the Denver area about exactly how to do that. And so what that brings to the NAB for residential colleges is there's no question that residential colleges already are social centers in their community. We hope to just extenuate that in a number of ways, especially the kind of really important dynamic work that Ken's doing or my colleague Nathan is doing. It's really good models about how to deepen that in significant ways.
I love that. Eli, I can't believe I'm in Boulder and I haven't met these guys. You'll have to introduce me to them. I just want to throw into this, since we keep talking about the business community entrepreneuring, there's hacker spaces. We have one called Tinkermill in our area in lots of communities. And I would love to see it happen that not only is there an interface between the folks doing things, creating things at those spaces, with the curiosity courses and maybe the foundation, but maybe eventually we could be part of helping to create those, as maybe if students wanted to, that could be their curiosity course group project, is they could help create a maker space.
And this will really emphasize the value of a liberal arts college in its geographical region.
Right.
That is something that has been, that got overlooked in the effort to become universal and to draw students in from wherever. And now that the demographics have changed, and many liberal arts colleges, many great liberal arts colleges are hurting for students, maybe it's time to re-energize the idea of the relationship between a liberal arts college and its broader community and its immediate community.
Well, colleges are hearing now. Pretty much every college we've talked to, and the Chronicle of Higher Ed has featured this in some of their workshops and webinars, that parents and students want to be closer to home. So now's the time. Now's the time to build these relationships.
Well, Greg, you have said that after this pandemic, education will not be the same. Do you want to close with that, with your comment, your thoughts about that?
Probably not in one sense. I'd like to close with a thought, though.
Okay.
And no, the world is not going to be. I came to this meeting, this conference, literally left a virtual 3-day conference that Schools That Can are running, and they make very strong points all the way through that it is definitely going to be a different world after we finish after we find a vaccine. Nothing will be quite the same in education. Very powerful comments. I think the one question that this will surprise the part, this is not a canned presentation. You made a comment earlier, Rob, that it was a political comment about Trump and supporters. Liberal education had as much to do with bringing Donald Trump to power as non-liberal arts education. To be able to say that, those other people were not liberally educated is not fair. And I think we have to take responsibility.
Okay.
The underlying question that you're talking about is, how do we build an education that reaches a larger community and reduces the inequities in our society?
Yes.
If I go through the power structure of the White House today, I haven't done so, but I'd be happy to bet you a dinner when we can all get together again, that 80% of those individuals had what would be called a liberal education. So we have to ask ourselves what we mean by a liberal arts education, as well as how we're delivering it to those we're trying to deliver it to and trying to reach. And that's not an easy thing to do. I'm wearing, in honor of this thing, I'm not sure you can read it, my American University in Bulgaria sweatshirt. I was on the board. And I will say that students in places like the American University in Bulgaria, the Liberal Arts University in Berlin, the European Humanities University in exile in Lithuania, kicked out of Belarus, they may have something to tell us about what it is we're trying to extend to these communities and these students that will get these individuals, will help them understand and gravitate to it. And my one example of doing that is I brought a group of students from the European Humanities University, college students and graduate students on the international moot court team from the European Humanities University to Washington, D.C., and they met with the students in Friendship Public Charter School, the debate club, underserved communities, underserved students in Southeast Washington, who, believe me, did not know where Belarus or Lithuania were before they met with these students. Within 5 minutes, those students gravitated to each other and understood they had something in common. They were trying to get an education in a society that was not responding to their needs.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I think we have to be careful how we pose the problem. There is a problem, the inequity in our society and the inequity of the education, but we have to be careful how we pose who it is and how it's being solved.
Agreed. And I think Dick Hirsch has talked with us about that fact that this is not about changing education for some students. This is about changing education for all students. We begin where we can. We begin where the need appears to be greatest, but we try in our local areas, in our communities, to enrich and extend what we mean by liberal education to a broader spectrum of people, and they will change us even as we change them.
Well said.
So we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, but please contact us in the meantime with further questions and practical questions. Again, we've had some really good conversations in the last week with many of the colleges that are participating today, and we look forward to more of that. And I want to thank you all for participating and for asking questions and for thinking about these things with us. Take good care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for attending.
If you all want to talk, I'll leave this on, but I need to head out. It was great. I really enjoyed this. Thanks, everyone. And if you have questions or feedback or things you want to talk with me more, just shoot me an email. I'm around.
Okay.
So.
Can we continue the conversation ourselves, or?
Yes. I'm just going to leave. You're in charge, Rob. You can keep
but
it
this
as
is
long
still
as you
being
want.
broadcast.
Yeah, this is broadcast. Anyone can keep watching. Who wants to
Okay.
listen.
Anybody who wants to stick around with us, that's fine.
Anyone wants to stick around for more informal questions and answers, feel free. We don't have any open questions at this point.
Great.
So
any other thoughts from any
We have
of
a
you?
lot of participants still on. It's the
we have
result.
9 who are still on.
Right.
Okay. Well, the Q&A still works, so if you want to be part of this, keep going. But let's talk a little, as we did last time, about what happened today, what you thought worked and didn't work, and what we need to.
Rob, I know I went off the reservation a little bit about
You
the
did
liberal
not.
education issue, but I think we have. I'm sorry, that was just a direction I had to go in, because
Absolutely.
I can't sit back and say liberal education is going to save this country.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I feel that when we hear groups of people talk about coastal elites, in part, they're talking about a system that seems that they have been excluded from. I mean, I've read articles in the Atlantic that says that there is a new aristocracy, and it's not the 1/10 of 1% or the 1%. It's 10% of us who are making sure that our kids get into the best colleges and make the best contacts and have the best networks, and that's why people who are relatively well educated are doing so much better during this pandemic. And so part of dealing with inequity is realizing that we need to open that system up.
Okay, I agree, but my question is, that 10% you're talking about who are creating those inequities, most of them were educated in liberal arts colleges.
Absolutely, which
that's
all
the
of
irony.
which says that we have to change.
We're dealing with.
Right.
But I think it has to be acknowledged, in a sense of what it means. What do we mean by a liberal arts education?
Greg, I want to respond to your point with an example of something that happened just a couple days ago that was over the weekend that was so remarkable to my husband and I. We're in Colorado, and Colorado is kind of a purple state. And it's a mix of working class towns and, fancy ski towns and so forth. I live in Longmont. It's the town over from Boulder.
My granddaughter comes from Boulder, was born in Boulder.
Well, okay. So you probably know about Longmont. For a long time, it was called really fun names like Long Tucky, and there was a turkey plant and beet farmers here. And a lot of the folks here, we have beautiful soil. We garden and we farm, and we have a little micro sort of like urban homestead, and we're very proud of it. And we're working along in our garden, and this gal came along and she started talking to us. She seemed really bright and interesting. She is in a public charter school, which was created by and has recruited her from St. John's. She's a classics expert, and they're teaching the classics to whoever can get into this school from the local community. And again, Longmont has traditionally not been a wealthy town. It's been the working class town next to Boulder. And we were there digging our hands in the soil, talking about how we've all become philosopher farmers or philosopharmers. And she's decided she's going to come start working in the garden with us because she didn't put one in and we were too ambitious. We needed help. And we were there talking about Homer, and people were bragging about, you know, of our friends who were there, what they translated from the Greek when they were at Marlborough or St. John, and how exciting it is. And I told her about NAB and how exciting it is that there are now public opportunities, public high schools where you can learn about these things and learn about them in an experiential way. And she was talking about how there's this experiential component of it, and they've even gone out and, you know, talked to people at the farms. So I think this is happening. I think that people are getting the idea and realizing that classics is the foundation for being able to think.
But see, here, but you and Rob probably, where I disagree, you know, the only book I've written was Teach Them to Challenge Authority. And my argument throughout was that the liberal arts are an attitude of mind, not a body of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
And that my argument is that you can create a liberal arts education teaching anything. And conversely, anything you are teaching can be antithetical to the liberal arts.
Right.
And that's why I worry when you say it was the non-liberal arts people who brought us Trump.
I want to go back to that.
Yeah, I wish that we weren't talking about political stuff like that, because I have so many conservative so-called friends who are really deep critical thinkers, and
right,
I don't think we need to bring those kinds of ideas into a conversation like this.
But the liberal art, what you and I mean by the liberal arts are basically attitudes of mind, not a given body of knowledge that you've read or seen.
Correct.
The ability to consider ideas, to apply, to extrapolate principles across different areas of thought, the ability to take different points of view,
exactly.
the ability to make a position and articulate it, and to back up your stance, to recognize when rhetoric is being used to manipulate you, to these are the exact things that I was talking about with our little, our friend from St. John.
But it's not just those skills, Mary. I would say it is wanting to use those skills.
That's right.
That is what a liberal arts education creates. You can have those skills, but it's valuing them and wanting to use them.
Let's think about what most incoming freshmen experience in our colleges today. Do they experience just what we've been talking about, the interaction of ideas and values and personal experiences, or are they receiving information that departments have decided that they want to impart to students before they choose a major?
Well, Rob, there's another part that I have to throw in here. I know I'm talking a lot. I'll just let you guys talk after this. But I found I attended two colleges as an undergraduate, an arts college and then a small liberal arts college with the self-directed focus. And I found it very unpleasant to be subjected to the being part of the hunting grounds for the faculty that were trying to find their proteges. And the pressure of that was horrific. It was really not fun at all. And even in colleges that, you know, art schools are by nature oftentimes very interdisciplinary. These, you know, and we're being told on one hand, spend a couple of years, study a bunch of different things, but the faculty sort of like giving you the yes, no, and you know that. Everyone knows that. If you're in a class of 10 students, all of a sudden you're not being called on. Or, you know, there's like, I mean, people use the term microaggressions. That's very unpleasant. And I think that we need to consider the fact that, thinking of Ken's students, I mean, how many of Ken's Scrappy Genius students want to be put through something like that? I mean, that right there is going to, you know, earn the college one semester tuition, and that's it. The kids are out.
Yep. It's
a big issue. We need to look at it. And again, Dick Hirsch has said this often enough, and so have you, Gregory, that we need to look at the whole picture. What we in the New American Baccalaureate are trying to do is start where we can. Start where there is an opportunity for these colleges to overcome the demographic challenge and to reach out And in the process of reaching out to new populations of young people, they will have to change in ways that we have advocated for many, many years. And they will have to become more, listen more and tell less. And they will have to allow students to use the value of their peer relationships to help build skills instead of being so individual that, as Woody Allen said, you know, he flunked theosophy for looking into the soul of the student sitting next to him. I mean, we need to bring folks together in a liberal arts environment rather than individualize and atomize them and make them feel that, as so many students from first generation minority and low-income backgrounds do, they come to campus and they feel lost. And that's why we have such a horrific level of completion by so many students who come to college for the first time. We have to change that. And in this case, the New American Baccalaureate, beginning in the high school in sophomore year, can begin to create an environment for these students that makes them, that gives them confidence and gives them a sense of challenge.
Self-efficacy and the support of their peers, right. Co-learning, social learning theory.
And brings that onto campus.
Yeah, cohort, all of those great ideas in practice.
Yeah. Okay.
But let me just, I mean, that summary, you shifted, at least I found it a slight shift, because what you're saying is, you know, what is the real goal? The real goal is to reach a group of people who are not being reached and create an environment in which they can succeed.
Yes.
That may or may not have a lot to do with liberal arts education. We think it does, but a lot of the things you just outlined could be just as productively pursued in a highly professional university.
You know,
so
that's not what the research tells us. The research tells us that the kind of students we're talking about do not succeed, do not graduate. You know, 50% of them drop out. So it could be pursued.
I'm saying, what I'm saying is, if you made the changes, I'm agreeing with you. I understand why they're not succeeding.
Right.
But well, they have honors colleges. I mean, they do have small colleges that, you know, within them, many of them that where the classes are small, students can do self-directed, they do their own senior project. But I mean, I read an article last week that I'm not sure if I think it was Forbes, but anyway, maybe it was New York Magazine, saying that the future of education is going to be dominated by a few elite cyborg universities. And I was like, no, that's not what parents and students are saying they want. The marketing is pushing them there. That's more fear-based marketing, but that's not what they're saying they actually want. They want to learn one-on-one. They want to have good job prospects. They want to be connected with people that might hire them. They want to have a cohort where they have a safe, high quality interpersonal experience. And, you know, all those big colleges that built the fancy cafeterias and the, you know, the spas and the hot tubs and the gyms and, you know, the workout centers in every dorm. Okay. You know, there are certain students who are going to want that, but that's also going to feel really empty to a lot of students. And I do think that we are, I think that we're on the leading edge of the next conversation.
I do too, and I guess is if I press far enough, I mean, my argument about liberal education is that it is the only universal education.
Right.
It is not cultural bound or time bound.
Right.
It is as relevant for the Chinese as it is for the Russians, it is for the Americans. So at one level, it to me is, it's not a question of liberal, it is what the core of education is about.
Right.
But before you get to that level, you can take a large university and create an environment in which students can succeed that pursues, you know, still true to the mission of that university. A lot of what you're talking about in terms of how you reach these disengaged or unengaged students is not per se liberal education, it's good education.
Right.
Right.
And my argument is the best professional education is a liberal education.
Yes.
But Gregory, in order to do that, you'd have to break the big universities into such small pieces that wouldn't be the big universities anymore.
That's another question as to what makes, quote, a big university.
Right.
But I
Right.
would say, yes, you would.
I mean, nobody comes out of the schools and saying, wow, the best experience I've ever had was that 200-person survey class in the auditorium. Nobody ever says that.
That's not quite true, I don't think.
Well,
Okay, well, maybe there's a few people that say that, but
No, look, I know a lot of people, and I put myself in this group. I was in large lecture courses where I was turned on to something that I then pursued in those small classes. And so that I'm not opposed to the large lecture, but, and again, because
is that what YouTube is for now? Sorry, I'm going off the rails there.
all I can say is that every lecture I've been to and every small class I've been to has the potential to either be a liberal arts experience or a non-liberal arts experience.
right. Correct. I think, though, that what we miss in the conventional freshman, sophomore programs, whether they're liberal arts or larger universities, is the one-on-one and is the opportunity for intimate conversations and the emphasis by the college or university that these first 2 years are really important. They're not just a prelude to a major.
Right. They're not just the recruiting ground where you're going to get.
No, those are the things that are, but yeah, I've seen that.
Ken gets the last word here.
Boy, well, I would say, we've been talking from one of the things I get in trouble a lot for, both in home and at
Oh,
school.
I'm sure you never get in trouble, Ken.
I do.
He's always in trouble. I
If
mean,
you're
what do you mean?
outspoken, but you have a smile, you get in trouble a little less. But
No,
I refer to the batch processing model, which is,
yeah,
that's when our focus is, okay, this is what every student needs to have. And I think about, one of the best-selling self-help books from ages ago was What Color is Your Parachute? That speaks to me to students not having traction or momentum that's going to get them to the next phase of their life, where they recognize the value that they bring to the world.
right.
And that's what we have to focus on. What value do you bring to the world? How does what we have, the means of thinking, disciplined thinking, how does that help you bring what you have to bring to the table? And when we are looking at batch processing, what color is your parachute means that is, we are hoping for a soft landing for the kids we've finally put, right? There's none of this. We have to have this. And that, I love the idea that the new American Baccalaureate starts in sophomore 10th grade, because we are really talking about trying to create something that we are reaching across all kinds of aisles. We're reaching across all kinds of fixed, institutional.
Graders are being batch processed.
Mm-hmm.
But Ken's point that it starts in the 10th grade is absolutely powerful.
Yes.
I mean, that's exactly why I'm drawn to it. A lot of things I'm quibbling about, but I just know there is a need for this new baccalaureate.
Mm-hmm.
And one way of defining it is the way Ken has. It reached across a chasm that now exists artificially.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I'm going to jump off.
Yeah, and I want you, Ken and Greg, to be part of. Hopefully, you can join us in 2 weeks and see what happens.
Ken and I are going to put our brains together, and we're going to grind out some interesting ideas for the Curiosity course.
Okay, terrific. Thanks so much again.
We're going to do that on Friday. Talk to you guys later.
Yeah,
Everybody.
great.
Oops. And